Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a great workshop today, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to introduce you to my co-host. Ryan Petterson is Director of Field Education in the School of Earth, Energy, and Environmental Sciences at Stanford University. And Ryan and I both come from this field sketching and nature journaling from the same place, which is we're both have worked in the field as biologists and geologists, and we come into the sketching and art part of it only very recently and with no formal art training. So it's really fun to have Ryan's perspective, and he's going to do some great tutorials for us today, which you'll see shortly. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us.
Thanks, my pleasure.
And for helping with the co-host duties, running our chat and helping with that. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to start out with a short presentation to show you what we're going to be covering, which is we're going to really focus on how to narrow down complex subjects, especially landscapes or even difficult subjects like animals, into simple shapes, or how you zero in and then get started with some spare lines and just a really simple process. And after that, we're going to jump into how to add color quickly and easily. And each of us will be sharing our methods, which are really different, and you'll enjoy seeing our kit and how we approach adding color to our field journal pages. So let me get my presentation going here. Great, so we are, as I said, Ryan and Roseann, and I didn't say, my name is Roseann Hanson. I'm with the University of Arizona's Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill. I'm the Art and Science Program Coordinator, and I've been keeping field journals for 35 years, and only recently have they really been adding a lot more art, and a lot of mine is natural history focused. My husband Jonathan and I publish natural history books and teach natural history through our Field Arts Institute and through also some overlanding, the Overland Expo. We teach a lot there as expedition leaders. So what we're focusing on today are these intimidating subjects, like these vast landscapes. And I'm going to show you examples of a photo and a good example of a sketch that really captured it. This is Xiang Shen, the Nature Journal Club on Facebook, and he's posted these fantastic sketches. This one is great. It shows the complexity of the geology of Horseshoe Bend, and he's really distilled it down into just shapes, lines, and values. Values being the darks, the mediums, the lights, the white paper, and really captures that subject beautifully. Here's another one Shin did. Again, a lot of canyon country he does. This one is particularly great because that's a super intimidating landscape to sketch. And he distilled it out really well, especially with that tree there, and not trying to do a whole lot of detail is what I really liked about this. And you really get a sense of that landscape there. This is a sketch that I did. I went a little different here. I was a little more stylized, almost kind of Art Deco-y, where it's really distilled down into shapes. You can see how I really, the mountain in the back became one shape. The clouds, very stylized. Everything is described with just very simple lines. Instead of a bunch of grass, I did little grass symbols. The rocks in the foreground, I did almost as just symbols of rocks in this kind of interesting swirls. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but the lesson here is we're distilling down complexity into simple shapes using elegant lines, very simple lines. This was another landscape I did. This was demonstrating a very rare event in the desert here when we had flow in our dry washes over the winter. And instead of drawing everything, I really zeroed in on the shapes, the center of it being the flowing water, the dark mountains, the dramatic clouds. Did I try to add all the houses and the telephone poles? No, I edited those out. So that's a great way to capture something, the essence of what we want to see and show. I'm going to also be talking about using this way of seeing and sketching on difficult subjects like animals. And so I'll do a demo that I did with this mule deer at the Desert Museum, how I figured out how to start, how to do the proportions, and just narrowing it down to shapes to get it quickly onto paper and then add color. Ryan does some beautiful work, especially out in the field and geology field trips. This really demonstrates well how he focused on a primary subject. The beautiful rock formation became central. Did he draw every single tree? No, and he edited it down so you were getting the essence of that landscape as seen, and then added some beautiful watercolor to make that work. These are more examples of Ryan's way of distilling these complex landscapes down into thumbnails, framed landscapes, the 3D cubes, which I love doing. And he's going to be walking us through how he does this, which actually I think we're going to move right into that coming up. Yes. So Ryan, if you want to, I'm going to pass it over to you now. And if you want to get started giving us a tutorial on how you do this.
Great, thank you. Yes. So what we're going to do today, obviously we would love to be doing this outside in the wide world, but recent events, of course, is inside. One of the things that we've been working on a lot is trying to figure out how to leverage online resources and virtual field trips to help with teaching of all kinds. I'm looking at a lot of geology field trips, nature journaling as well. So we're going to use one of those resources today, and this is a virtual field trip. We'll put a link for this in the description and send that out as well. But this is a virtual field trip that is in Tuolumne Meadows in the Sierra Nevada, and I'm going to walk through sort of how I might, and again, this is how I might do it, not necessarily how you should or somebody has to, but how I first sort of tackle what I want to draw, sort of framing framing my landscapes by moving around, picking a view, something that captures my attention, but is also something that is at the right level for my own skill set, and being able to draw, not tackling something too difficult that I'll get frustrated with, but something that's at a difficulty level that I feel like I can accurately represent and do so without taking too much of my time if I'm out in the field. And so I'll go through a quick introduction to the website itself and the virtual field trip, and then we'll go through a demo showing you how I do that sketching, and I'll talk through that as I go to give you a sense of what I'm thinking as I'm doing it. I think that's in teaching these things, sometimes the hardest thing to get at is what's the thought process. We see what somebody did, but we don't necessarily know why they did it. And so hopefully you'll get some of that out of this little demo. So here you go. We're going to focus in on one area in particular, more or less chosen semi-randomly. Feel free to look around to other things, but the sort of the first step we talked about is posing your landscape, right? Are you going to draw your landscape of just the grass? Well, maybe not. Maybe if there's some aspect of the grass you want to draw, but that's sort of a wall of green. So you're sort of thinking about what exactly that you want to do about that. And we're not necessarily going to, we may not want to try and do the entire landscape. That's a little daunting, and trying to draw a 360-degree sketch is going to be pretty hard. So we're sort of looking around here and thinking about what things we're noticing and what stories we want to tell and what sort of elements that we can work to our sketches. So as we think about that, I'm actually focusing in, I like these mountains in the background. I like that there's background elements. There's sort of these mid-ground trees here that I'm seeing. And the river here is road. It's moving off into the distance, so it gives us a sense of scale. That said, I don't think I want to do this entire view. So I can zoom in and zoom out and sort of frame, just as I would in real life, frame the sort of story that I want to tell. And I'm kind of liking this right now. And so if you hold this up on your own screen or on your own computer, I'm actually going to switch to show you the drawing that I'm doing. So I won't be sharing this view. So make sure to pull this up on your own computer if you can. So I am going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to move to sharing. All right, so as I'm doing this, I'm sort of looking at a lot of these different elements. And the first thing that sort of catches my eye is sort of the grass in the foreground. And I'm really just sketching it. I'm thinking about the box that I want, but I'm not necessarily drawing the box just quite yet. I'm going to draw some of this, draw some grass. I'm up front here, and so I'm putting in a little bit more detail, a little bit darker lines as the grass sort of crosses the screen. Next, I'm sort of seeing the other major element here I see is this sort of the stream that comes across. And I see it come this way, not that way. Looks like it turns a little bit over here. And comes down this way. Pretty basic, just blocking that in. From here, I'm also seeing some trees that are coming up this way. I'm seeing some way up that. Seeing a lot more trees at this end, some bigger ones. And then down, so I'm seeing a little bit of mountain, and now I'm drawing these. I've sort of gotten a little bit lighter and then a little bit lighter as I'm drawing these hills in the background. These are now pretty light. Pretty straightforward, but not a lot of detail out back here because this is, like we talked about, this is further away. But now I want to come in here, and now that I've sort of given myself locked in some guiding foreground, a middle ground, and a background, I'm going to add in some details that give this a little bit more space. One of those things is we see this middle ground is flat, and I tend to like these sort of. There is actually a reason for this. It's not just random that these lines make it look like this is flat. This has to do with the actual physics of foreshortening. But we get a little bit of these lines here in here. Get a little bit of grass. This is now further away. Grass, but this is now further away, and we can see that as it proceeds back, grass turning really light and pretty minimal. There's a little slope here. I'm going to draw some of these little lines there. I'm going to darken these a little bit. So there, with just some basic sketching in there, we've got some flat ground in this middle area. Now these trees, I can see with my eye, I can see a lot of detail in those trees, but I'm not going to be able to represent that very well. I do see a little bit more, I am able to see a little more detail in the tree as they pop up over the top. But for the moment, this mass of trees is going to be a mass of trees. It's going to have a certain value, but it won't, I'm not necessarily going to get in there and all that, the gory detail of those trees. That said, there are some trees out here that are also by themselves, and they put a little bit more base on this to ground these trees a little bit. These trees are there. And then I'm going to come back in here and really punch these up a little bit to distinguish them from the background. The same with these as well. If you have any questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat, and Roseann can call and I can answer them while I'm drawing here. Add a little bit of water lines in here. Now I'm going to come in and start defining these a little bit more. I want to make sure that as I move back in the scene, I am losing detail. So I want the really big, hard lines up here in front. And I want the really soft lines back here on the mountain so that they drift into the distance. But I want to make sure that I do get the details that are important here. As such, now let's see here. Put in some grass in here. This is the same grass. Again, this is the same idea of creating this depth in these images. This grass and this grass is probably the same grass, but these are now diminishing into the distance. And so they're going to be less and less detailed as we go. And I'm, again, just representing the grass. I'm not drawing every blade. Excuse me. I'm just sort of giving a representation of it. I'm going to add some more detail in here, sort of darkened in here. And we could do more. We could definitely add a lot more information here, but we really don't need to. In a lot of ways, this sort of gets the gestalt of that landscape quite well. I'm going to do one last thing here, which is I'm going to add a box. A frame here, and I'm going to do something very specific here as well in this frame. Is you can see that I'm leaving this foreground element, the grass, to break that plane of the frame. And this is really just a stylistic thing, but it helps pull that that grass into the foreground. And your eye automatically thinks, oh, that grass is in the foreground, and it can help with that. So this is, in some ways, you could leave this just as a sketch. From what I tend to try and do is using the sketches and drawings as a starting point for making observations and thinking about what we're looking at. And so right away, every line I've drawn in here is caused by something. Nothing is by accident in this scene. And so I can even just looking at my drawing, I can start to ask questions like, wait, why does the grass here abruptly stop? Is that a function of, the growth pattern of the grass? Is that a function of the stream channel? What's making that grass grow where it is? I can then look at, oh, I drew all these flat lines because it's a flat surface. It's a meadow. Okay. Well, why is there a meadow here when there are these rounded peaks up here? Is it the same process? I can also see the line of trees here is a pretty abrupt stop in the trees. I'm also getting an abrupt stop in the trees up here. Are they caused by the same thing? All of these things can sort of generate questions about the landscape you're looking at. And it can be really helpful in guiding your attention and noticing things that you wouldn't have necessarily noticed just looking at the scenery. Because every time you put your pen on the paper to represent some feature of the landscape, there's a reason that feature of the landscape is there. I might personally, I like adding some color, so I might end up at some point splashing color on this. I think we'll talk about color later in the workshop, so I'm going to leave this as is. But any questions about that right now? Roseann, you want to add anything?
That was really awesome. I really like the fact that we could look at what you were seeing and now see how you pulled that into a photo or a sketching. Did everyone get a chance, I hope, to look at that screenshot in comparison? If not, Ryan, would it be, let's see, possible to share that real quick so people can see the sketch versus the scene that you had?
Let me see if I can compare those two. I can certainly go back to screen sharing that.
Yeah, I know on the document thing, there's a way you can do a split screen. There you go.
I'm going to actually try and do one. So, okay. So in this, you should be able to see my view is the drawing, and then what I'm sharing is the image. Is everybody seeing that?
Yeah, I hope so.
One thing that I forgot to mention here is one of the I didn't like in choosing this scene. Partly it was that I like the stream. I like the mountains. Being a geologist, looking at glaciated peaks is kind of my jam. But I also looking at this grass and how that shows up in the drawing is sort of been important. This is more thinking from a compositional perspective. Is this grass definitely catches your eye, but it doesn't just catch your eye and leave it there. That sort of diagonal grass draws your eye in and then catches the stream, which draws your eye back into the image. And I think this is something that if you are actually painting something or creating a landscape from scratch in an artistic sense, you might think about those compositions, adding those compositional elements. For us as nature journalers, I think that process certainly, it doesn't have to happen at the beginning, but it certainly helps to happen at the beginning to think through those compositional questions before you set down and start drawing.
We don't have any questions on the chat yet. We do have an affirmation that yes, she was one person at least was able to see the screenshot while you were sketching, which is great. Any questions for Ryan about his process? Go back. Why don't we go back to Ryan? What do you say? I'm going to go back and reshare some of those other sketches in comparison. We can do sort of a commentary on each of those scenes and talk about why we think those worked. So I'm going to share here. Let's see, I'm going to go back. So looking at this Horseshoe Bend in the river, you can see that Shen did not try to draw all the way back to the horizon, but focused on the actual geology of what's creating the Horseshoe Bend. And his lines, his shapes are what really dominate here. And you get a sense of you are looking down, which he successfully did by using the darks in the back. You can see down where the water is. He didn't try to draw the water close up because that would have drawn the eye into those details. So by leaving that blank where the water moves around the bend, I think that really worked. Ryan, what do you think I know like as a geologist, how do you not want to draw every single gorgeous rock?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I actually think especially the foreground and the sideground where he's represented the edges of the scene, sort of grounded a little bit without going into too much detail and drawing your eye away from the center of the image. I think it works really well.
And, Ryan, I'll have to have you check the chat if there are any questions because I can't find the chat when I have screen share up. So
I'll keep an eye on that.
Okay. So on the other Shen's other sketch here, again, an incredibly complex scene, which I'll point out, I think he grounds it really, really well with that tree on the right, because that gives you a sense of where to anchor your eye, and then everything else flows out. There is more detail on the leftmost pinnacle, which is closest to the viewer, to you. And then the rest, you can see how he receded in making the sketches just dots and barely lines going off. I think that worked well. It's very daunting to do these, but it's also freeing at a certain point, and they get really fun. I've been practicing these a lot more lately because I'm one of those people who tends to want to draw everything, and then I love colors, so I'm always like, yay, color, color, color. And but by focusing on the ink work or the pencil work, it's very freeing, and I've been enjoying it a lot. Ryan, do you want to say anything about
I think there's another thing here that you know, drawing something like a tree, which has complicated details in it, against the backdrop of another feature that has complicated details in it, it can drown it out pretty easily. Even just looking in the photo on the left, you can see that the image of the tree, the photograph of the tree, blends into the background a little bit. And trying to draw that distinction out can be really challenging. And you can see what I'm assuming this is intentional in the drawing, is that directly behind the tree, there's less detail in the rocks. They're really sketchy lines. There's not a lot of shading. And you know, I think that is a handy thing to think about, is to, if the backdrop of your subject is really complicated, it will draw attention away from the subject. So minimizing the detail directly behind the subject can help bring it out from the background.
Yes, I noticed that as well. I think I would have been tempted to try to make that shadow of the center cliff there, the shadow behind the tree, and that would have bombed this particular sketch, because in drawing with just line, if you put too much detail in, that jumps forward. And I think that he really nailed it. He's an architect, I believe. Do you know him, Ryan?
I don't.
Yeah, he's a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley, and an architect. So, but we really enjoy seeing his sketches too. I think I talked a little bit about this one already. I would go, yeah, going here for a more very representational. I even, you know, experimented with just almost an Art Deco kind of thing, where things were symbols rather than the actual landscape, because that's a really complex thing to try to draw. There's so much going on there. It's a flood. Everything's kind of monotone. So just focusing on a few things, and you know, you can, as Ryan said, you know, are we trying to do a complete rendering? This is not a photographic rendering sketch. This is capturing the landscape. This one is much more arty than say something that is more like Ryan was doing, where you want to take note of geologic features. In this sketch, I would ask, what are these plants growing in the floodplain? Why are they able to grow there? That would be a question I would put there. How long is this water going to be here would be a question I would ask. But in terms of the drawing, calling out the different trees, what they do, how can they survive flooding, not get washed away, things like that. So,
Roseann, there's a question that actually might feed into this drawing a little bit. The question is about capturing snow without using color. And I'm just noticing, looking at that, here for sure, and then also even just clouds. A similar approach is, how do you capture a cloud without color?
Yeah, I'm a desert person, so snow is not my forte. But it's an absence of color in this case. If we're not using if you're just using pencil or pen, I think there's two things that make a bright thing like the snow or the clouds really pop. And that is when you put something dark next to it. It's hard to, let's see, find one that works a little better. So in this drawing here, the bubbling water at the little waterfall right in the middle wouldn't have been as obvious as kind of bubbly water if I hadn't made the rocks really dark at the edge of the water. That helps your eye get fooled into that being bright white, if you will. Clouds, it's the same thing. The dark next to the white in the paper is what's going to give your eye the contrast. A lot of what we're drawing is not the actual, you're not drawing the actual thing that you want to represent. In a lot of cases, you're helping the eye to process lights and darks to create this scene in a way that's very pleasing and reminds you and represents it really well. But I didn't draw every single thing. I don't know if that completely covered it. Here's using watercolor, another great way of showing the clouds. You would do the same thing with snow, I think. The darker blue stopping, he didn't paint the clouds, painted around them. It's what they call negative painting. But I was so confused by that term for years. I stopped using it because I think for beginners, it's crazy hard to grasp. But Ryan, do you want to talk about how you do clouds or snow? You're more a snow person.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have all that much experience with snow. I think part of it for me is picking a view that I feel like I can represent, and in some ways that's picking a view that has a good contrast between the details that you might see in an unsnow-covered space or tree or rock versus snow, which is going to have no features on it. And that can help a little bit. I think that, yeah.
I've got some, I'm going to go look for an example during your, a little bit later when I can go find it. There's a good example of Kim Nett's nature drawing online. She is in Alaska and she does snow really, really well with just pencil and pen. So
I also add this, if you know, towards the end of the workshop, I think there's free time for questions and things like that. If people have specific images that they are wondering how we might represent that, I'm happy to, you know, if you want to pull those up and send them to us, you know, assuming there is time, and we probably can't get to everyone, but if there is time, I'm happy to sort of take a crack at seeing how we might represent those sort of things. While you're on that, oh yeah, I was just gonna say, there's a question about,
I can call it back up, so keep going.
yeah, there's a question about drawing the frame first or not. This one, you can see I didn't use a frame at all. I go back and forth. Partly this is because I haven't really settled into a specific habit. I haven't really been doing this all that long, so I'm still out there. Compared with this, where I did put in frames, I think one of the important things here is that all of those frames that I put in this drawing, I mean this journal page, are afterwards. This is sort of, if you follow along with John Muir Laws, this is the post hoc composition. So it's doing a lot of sketches and then coming in afterwards and adding some frames, adding some backgrounds to draw attention and organize the information. And so it is, you know, you can sort of see that the difference between the very top right with the sketch of the U-shaped valley unframed with the framed picture of a glacial boulder popped out in front of it. I tend to use frames afterwards. I tend to draw the picture and then frame it. And that works for me. I certainly can't say that there is a absolute good way to do it or not, but that's certainly how I approach it.
Yeah, I agree. And there's want to absolutely reiterate here, I think Ryan and I are on the same page. There's no right way to do anything. There's no right tools. There's no, you've got to have this. I mean, Ryan sketches with ballpoint pen, whatever colors you want to use. If you like them, use them. You know who Tony Foster is? The Foster Museum in Palo Alto. I got to see him earlier this year, and people were grilling him on, what colors do you use? What are the exact colors in your palette? Because he pulled out his little palette. And he said, I have no idea. He said, I've had some of these tubes for 30 years, and if I like it, I put it in the palette and I learn how to use it, but he doesn't go by any rules. He makes up his own rules. So we're kind of anarchists here. So I'll do a demo next. I'm going to show how we kind of do this similar approach for the deer. So let me swap to that. There we go. And I went old school. Instead of screen sharing my deer, I printed out the photo. So that works. Also, just by way of explanation, yesterday practicing this, my document camera, my fancy, expensive document camera, packed it in. The video or the connection broke, so I am using a delightfully bogged system, thanks to Ryan and my husband Jonathan, using an iPad. So the lighting isn't going to be exactly what we would have had. So this deer was at the Desert Museum. The sketch that I did and completed was, you saw it earlier, that was done live, and I did complete this live, and I snapped a photo because I do like to have the before and after. So how would I go about tackling this super intimidating for beginners subject? Same way, I'm going to look for shapes. I'm going to look for things I can compare proportion-wise. And the easiest way to start is, first I'm going to do I want to do you do your horizon, which in this case is where the deer is lying down, because that's the easiest place to start. Don't try to start with the head or the ears or something, because it's a little harder to anchor that to the ground. Then I developed a system that I got from Mark Taro Holmes, who's a really great urban sketcher guy, really, really great to see his work. He does dots. He uses dots to index things on his page that he's looking at before he commits to sketching, so that he can test whether it's working or not. And then the dots are just really minimal. And I kind of do the same thing. I am using pencil today. I usually just go pen straight to the paper and to heck with it. And sometimes I get some really spectacular blobs and things that can't be recognized. So that's just all part of it. So the first thing I will do to get started is I'm going to mark either with a dot or just the two ends of the deer, her fore and aft, her butt and her chest, because that'll give me something to start with. Now, how do I figure out where to put her other parts so that she isn't completely disproportional? Well, I'm going to use the the classic measuring proportion tool that you've seen artists do, where they hold up their drawing instrument and measure, and it works great. So in person, I would do this on the deer. Fortunately, this is a nice lazy deer and she didn't move. On the picture, I'll just show you. I'm going to do a quick measure using my thumb. I'm going to have to do this kind of oddly so you can see it. I use my thumb to mark it. So I would see, okay, from the tip of her ear to the base there, I'm roughly going to mark that with my thumb. And I'm going to compare it to the length of her body. And it's about 7/8. It's all not as long as her body, but I think 7/8 is good. It's not 3/4. It's a little longer. So then what I do on my sketching, here's my measurement of that butt there, from her chest to her butt. And I want to go about 7/8 of that up to her top of her ear. So I'm just sort of going to, this is all estimating. This isn't, we're not trying to do perfect. And then I'm going to do just a quick light triangle to mark that. So now what? I'm going to go ahead and start with some other shapes here. Her roundy body here, that butt. And I'm sketching a little oddly here because I'm trying not to, I normally would cover it. I want you to see it. So her butt, her haunch comes in like that. That's circle there. And there's another, or oval. There's another oval here. I'm doing this darker than I normally would do so you can see it, but I'm getting her shapes here. Now, next I'm going to go for this shape that is the kind of a weird rectangle trapezoid here of her neck. So I'm not going to angst it. I'm just going to sketch in lightly where I think that is. And now I'm going to do another measure. So let's use that ear. That ear is a really awesome tool. And again, if I were doing this in person, I'd be holding this up. You know, how's that? And so that ear is about the same width as that neck there and here. If you can see how I'm comparing the proportions here. So I want to make sure that this line here is about the same as here and the beginning of her face, which I'm going to go ahead and do a quick, very simple triangle-y thing here. And now I'm going to, that I have that, I'm going to sketch in a representation of the other ear, which is a little foreshortened, meaning it's pointed toward me, so it's not as tall as this one. So far, the proportions I'm mostly happy with here. And I'm going to go ahead and now start doing a little bit more line work to, let's get her jaw in, little shape there. And I'm going ahead and notice how if I don't like where I place the line, just make another one around it. There's her nice fat tummy, her haunches coming around here. And you can see this becomes part of the design, or the design here. I'm not worrying too much about exact. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watercolor over this too, although this would make a nice sketch just to leave as it is. So let's finish the ear here maybe. Just suggest that. I always have to double check the size of mule deer ears because they're so big. They really are that big. These might have could have even been bigger in this sketch. And I'll put her nose in, that a little dark. And the eye is always super critical. If you screw up placement of the eye on animals, it's kind of all over. So she's a prey species, so hers is way out here on the side. She's actually looking up here. Pretty okay placement. And I think I'm not going to do a whole lot more here because I'm going to be doing some watercolor. She's in the shadow. There's not a lot of more detail I want to do right now with my pencil. I might sketch in a little bit of suggestion of shape using the roundy lines. But other than that, I think I'll stop on that. I think that's a good example of the essence of how to use the dot mapping by doing my points like that, and the proportions, and just checking the proportions. Because if we get those proportions wrong, it's all over. So on the second half, we'll do some of the color demo on that. So let me switch off that and see where you guys are at. Okay, any questions?
There's no questions in the chat just quite yet.
Okay. Any observations, Ryan, you want to do on that?
I actually have a question for the audience at this point. Is we're happy to field any questions you might have, but I'd also be interested in getting some feedback in terms of when it is following along with these drawings working. Can you see them well? Is there anything that we can adjust in how we're doing that to make that more useful for you?
That's a good question. I think I want to go back to the frame question here, because in my journal, I ended up doing a frame. Let me see if I can share this even just this way. There's the printout of how this looked when I did it in person. So I did the frame like Ryan did. I added it after I drew the deer to sort of enclose it. And what I wanted to do was emphasize the fact that I was trying to capture her ears were like the only thing moving. Her ears were like, wah, 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 wah. Because even though she's in the Desert Museum, her job is to always listen. And that was my focus on that, was those ears. And so I drew multiple ears. I didn't do it in this sample, but it would be easy to add after all the different places the ears were looking, because she's looking for predators, right? But in this case, I think this deer was actually listening for her keeper for breakfast.
I know that we're drifting into a block here that you have blocked out for more questions. I was actually going to add a little bit in terms of going off the frames a little bit more. There was another comment on doing frames ahead of time to sort of focus attention into a certain spot. And I could also talk, if there's time right now, to talk about using thumbnails. It's something I didn't just show in that drawing, but partly because I'm doing those thumbnails in my head, but it may be actually useful to go through and do thumbnails ahead of time. And I can go through an example of that if that's useful and we have the time for it.
Yeah, I think we're great on time. Absolutely. Thumbnails are fabulous, and a great way to free yourself from the tyranny of perfect big drawings. Go for it.
All right, so I'm gonna, if you follow that, I'm just gonna share the camera here. So, but if you follow the link, you can sort of look around as well. Sort of what I did in my as I was looking around, I'm sort of in my mind thinking some quick thumbnails here as I'm looking around, and for example, what the final drawing might have looked like in a quick thumbnail is just trying to get the compositional elements and get some of the big picture tonal values in to see what that might look like, and that can be really quick. Really just a matter of, that quick, 30 seconds, and I can sort of already see like, well, will that composition work for me? Yeah, okay, maybe. I also was sort of looking around, and in my mind, one of the other options that I had was, well, I kind of like how, just using these real near trees as a frame and then zooming in on one of these mountains. That's also, it's definitely a different image, but it's still a landscape. And I kind of liked how that was doing, so I debated maybe going that direction. We could also do a little bit more, just using the trees as framing for a little thumbnail here of the idea here is really just, obviously this is really quick and sketchy, but it's giving giving a sense of the major tonal values and the composition, and how it's each of these gives you an idea of how it might end up at the end. I think for me, I tend to do these. It's probably a good practice. I should probably do these more actually drawing them, but I don't. I tend to do them in my head a little bit, which is maybe part of my practice, and so much of my practice of patient journaling is trying to quickly draw something in sketch while I'm hiking or trying to corral students or teaching something else while I'm sketching. And so I'm always trying to move pretty quickly about stuff. But this is probably a good habit to get at. You can see, even more little thumbnails of, like I can see there's a spot here in the creek where there's a tree in the water. And I can see pretty quickly that it's already getting a little too complicated, and it's not popping in the way that I want. Even just looking at how this is progressing, I can kind of see, like, well, is it really not quite working the way that I thought it was going to work? So I can say, well, yeah, cool, I checked that off, but I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna actually work with that one because I like how that one's laying out.
And
although
I think
I'm looking at these thumbnails, I actually really like that one too.
yeah, I did too, Ryan. This kind of answered one of the questions, and that was, do we worry about composition rules in our sketches? And then real quickly, someone said, is that just an ordinary Bic pen?
Yeah, so first one, yes, it was a Bic, I think it's ordinary, but it's a Bic Cristal 1.6 millimeters. So it's a bold ballpoint pen, but it is just a basic ballpoint pen.
Is it waterproof?
Yeah. Yes, as much as I can tell. Yeah, once it's
We're
dry.
about to find out, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I haven't had problems with it. It's a little smudgy in the first few seconds, but after that, I've never had problems with it running. In terms of worrying about compositional elements and compositional techniques, obviously personal preference. I mean, I think that I like thinking about it because one, it's just fun, and it is human nature to like things that are aesthetically pleasing. And so the degree to which you can accurately represent a landscape while also taking into account compositional ideas, I think it's certainly fun for me. And I think it's too much to pretend that fun is not part of this. If this wasn't fun, I don't think any of us would be here. We're not here making millions. We're here because we enjoy the process. And so I think aesthetics are going to play into that. I also think in terms of the using compositional elements or thinking about compositional elements when you're picking what you want to sketch is really useful, because the compositional elements do help you draw that sketch. And if you can choose a view that has some of those elements, your sketching will be a lot easier. I know for me, when I started trying to just pick a view and sit down where it was comfortable and draw what I saw, it was really hard because I couldn't capture a lot of originality in space, and I got frustrated really easily. But when I started thinking, okay, what's this drawing going to look like? How am I going to actually represent that three-dimensional space? Is there this stream that's sort of leading your eye in? Are there these elements of different distance that I can draw? I was much happier with what was coming out, and I was encouraged to do it more. Sorry, that was sort of the long-winded answer to
No, that was great. And there's another question that works well into this. Wendy asks, as a beginner, what is better to sketch in the field and touch up later, or take a photo and sketch off that? And that's a great question. So from my perspective, Wendy, we're out sketching in the field, and that's what we're nature journaling, field sketching, journals are all about for us, as opposed to studio journals and studio work. It's kind of at that essence of being out there, and you are trying to capture what is out in the wild and what you're seeing right then, and then responding to it, asking questions. I think that just looking at Ryan's page here is actually, people worry a lot about page layout. Like, oh, I have to get my page perfect so it looks amazing and I can share it and everyone's gonna go, ooh. But he didn't think about this page in terms of design at all. At least I don't think, Ryan. And yet it's going to turn out really cool with the thumbnails on the side. And then he does the larger sketch, and then he fills in with questions or comments. Why is there a meadow? You know, that there's going to be an answer to that. It's going to have to do with moisture and sun exposure. You know, why are there trees there and not over here? So to answer that, is it better? I take a photo too, because sometimes I just don't have time, and then I will go back and camp at the end of the day if I'm out in the field or back at home. And yes, I will keep working on it. There is a danger, though, I will say, of overworking and noodling something to death. And sometimes these, like if Ryan kept working on that sketch right there, he'd probably wreck it. He'd put too much detail in. It's perfect the way it is. See, he's going to keep noodling at it.
Yeah, no, I think I would totally agree with that. I think I would follow that up with a perfect example just from this sketch alone is that, you know, one of the questions I came up with in looking at my sketch and doing the sketch was, wait, why is the grass, this tall grass, stopping right here? If I had taken a photo and then come home and drawn that image, I actually wouldn't be able to go back and follow up that question with some more inquiry. I wouldn't be able to look around at the stream channel and think, well, is this actually, you know, part of the meander? Is this a meander that is now been abandoned? Is there something in the soil? I think being there in the moment, I think sometimes it's really hard to explain why being there in the moment is important, but I think there are some specific things that we can say of, well, if you see something, you can't follow up if you got home and noticed it in your photograph. And I certainly use that a lot, both for just the fun nature journaling and the more sort of scientific field notes going out and doing research. Is I see it all the time with grad students that take photos, come home, look at it, and are like, oh wait, what the hell is that? But once you're home, you're done. You can't follow up. You can't you can't go back and inquire more about what you're looking at. So the process of doing a sketch in the field, I think, is really important and drawing attention to things that you can go back and look at while you're still there.
That's a really good point. And that also speaks to this next question Billy asks. He's an overlander, travels quite a bit out of his vehicle, working on projects, expeditions. So his question is perfect, really, because Ryan and I are also travel a lot, whether it's for field work or overlanding expeditions. We don't go and sit places for long periods of time, on the move, point to point often. How do we, it's challenging to circle back and add sketches or watercolor in the journal later. What are some tips? And that's great. I'm actually working on this right now. Billy, Graham Jackson and I are actually talking about this. Graham also loves to keep journals, but he's often busy running very complex training expeditions. So what I'm recommending, what I recommend is I use a mini journal, the field notes. Hopefully I'm holding that right. Field notes size, and I also stick some blank watercolor paper in there too, in my little wallet. And while I'm on the road, while I'm, you know, we're maybe trying to make 300 kilometers that day, I take notes just shorthand, and I'll do those thumbnail sketches like Ryan's done in my mini notes, my little mini notebook. And then at the end of the day, I do set aside 30 minutes or so in camp to go back, you know, grab a beer, glass of wine, whatever, and I transfer that information into my journal, and I make that a sacrosanct activity. If you're doing an expedition, have something planned where you are doing something that's going to be documented and shared. You're trying to say recreate something. There's a, you know, Jonathan and I helped recreate a Sykes expedition in across the Libyan desert in Egypt. I had to keep my field notes up to date because that would be used later for writing up the expedition for publishing. So you've got to make it just part of your day. Use a little journal, keep quick notes or a little notebook, and then be religious about filling in your journal later. Don't leave it for a couple of days. You got to do it every day.
Yeah.
Sorry, not what you wanted to hear.
So my experience with field sketching and notes and things has been, you know, certainly in grad school, it was me by myself in the desert. I could sit down for hours and take notes, and there was nobody pushing me along, and I could take time. That has massively changed in the last, you know, for the last 10 years. Any sketching I do is while I'm hiking and talking to students, while I'm teaching something else, while I'm driving people around. It's all sort of a side note to another experience. And so in that sense, my technique is developed. I think probably the most important thing for me is not being tied to making the picture perfect, and letting go of that has been huge for me in terms of just as I'm walking back to the car, I, you know, have my little sketchbook and sketch something quickly and take a couple notes and hop in the car. And as long as I'm not emotionally tied to getting that picture exactly right, I can keep going and just write something quickly and move on. I think one of the things that I really like about one of the reasons I've developed the style that I have, which I think if you go back and look at the recording or if you were timing, this probably, I think 6 or 7 minutes to do this. And that's me talking through it and pointing things out as I go. It's really quick. And you know, if you're really just trying to get a quick sketching, it can happen like that.
Perfect. And you guys notice too, Brian's not worrying. I don't worry a lot about perfectly straight lines and rules as in ruled lines, because, you know, doing it this way, it's an immediate thing, and it's actually really freeing as well. Again, we teach more of and our style is definitely more field note style. It's not to say that there's a right way or a wrong way. Just letting you know if you're struggling, feeling like things aren't perfect, and you have this block where I think a lot of people are very perfectionist, like they want it to be utterly perfect. Freeing yourself from that is very difficult, but it can also bring more joy to this process and open you up to learning more as well, because you won't be so angsted over that page. I think we have time for like one more sample here, and then we'll take a short break, and I've got another poll, so Ryan's gonna share. That's cool. I like that.
I was just going to give an example. This is a sketch that I did on a field trip about something else, but I happened to see this view, and there's some geology. But the main thing that I wanted to focus on here is you can see none of these, there is no straight lines in here. I didn't fuss about it. The only thing I fussed about was the writing. I am a little fussy about my handwriting. But other than that, every line in here is a scribble. But as a whole, it comes together. It took very little time because I wasn't worried about getting the tree exactly right. It's not an illustration, it's a sketch. And keeping that in mind, that you're not doing a textbook illustration of what you're looking at, you're doing a sketch. And for me, making that leap from trying to draw a tree to scribbling some lines was an amazing leap in my.
Wonderful. Let's see. Ryan, I think if you can unshare your screen. Oh, there you are. We had one great comment here I want to share from Judy. Just a comment on photo versus actual subjects. I found my perception of depth is affected by actual versus photo subject. Drawing from a photo asks me to make 2 dimensions from 2 dimensions. So I must use imagined or previously experienced imagery. In the field, I'm drawing from 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions on paper. The drawings somehow then have a fuller dimension on the paper. That's absolutely true for me too. I do feel like I do a better job in the field. Maybe it's also because it's more immediate and we don't have hours to sit and we're forced to just sort of get it done. And sometimes the best are the things you do first and don't even think about it. If you think too hard, sometimes the brain can get in the way. So let me throw up another poll, which is kind of asking you, and it's leading into the next section, which we're going to jump into using color. And we'll just take a couple minute breaks. So those of us who've been drinking a lot of tea can run to the bathroom. Let me throw up this poll. We'll come back in like 2 minutes or so, which is more longer than you think. Oops, let's see. So this is painting in your journal. And then we'll be back in a couple minutes here. Well, it looks like people are coming back online, but I said it was going to be a short break. So hopefully this is useful to you guys and going well. Oh, what time does it end? Oh, 2 questions. What time does it end? We're going to go till a little about 11, but we'll be probably going to Q&A in about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So it'll be pretty fluid in that part. Jimmy's having trouble with his internet. Is it possible to get a recording? Yes, with a caveat. I had some trouble with Zoom at the beginning, so it launched at the wrong time. And then I forgot to turn the record on until about 10 minutes in. So Ryan and I are going to have to either redo the first part or I can do that. But we got most of it. So technology. It turned off the recording on me, so I didn't notice it till technology. So, okay, so the next part, color, which is really fun. Like I said, I love it. Adding it, the poll shows us that nearly everyone who answered the poll said color in some way, shape, or form. They love to do that. That's wonderful. Or if they don't now, they want to learn. 25%, 23% said they'd like to learn. So what we're going to show is the way we do it, the way I've morphed into doing it and why. And again, it's going to be like how we're explaining the sketching. There is no rules, no one way to do it. This is what works for me, and I'm going to tell you why, and then you can take whatever of that you like and use it or not. And there's so many great learning resources. So that said, what I'm going to do is share real quickly one more thing here and just talk about color. Okay, for beginners, and I can put this PDF, I'll load it onto the chat, and I can email it to anyone too if you don't want to scribble everything down. But I just wanted to cover for beginner watercolor people. If you just go out and buy a watercolor kit from Michael's or whatever, and you're getting frustrated, it's probably because there's these attributes and things that are good to know before you jump in, so you understand why the color is doing what it's doing on your paper, or more importantly, why it's not doing what you want it to do, which is what we get frustrated by. I will say real quickly, I'm a big fan of using high quality watercolors, those cheap pans and things from Michael's. They will frustrate you because they have a lot of fillers and they're not pure pigment, so they don't blend and mix well. However, that also, if that makes you happy, they're great and you love what it looks like, that is perfect as well. It's whatever makes you happy, and that's what we aim for. Just real quickly though, watercolors, quickly, this is huge. I mean, people can spend years learning watercolor attributes and things like this. So this is a very, very quick overview. The colors can be called warm or cool based on where they are on the spectrum. So you can have a really cool blue, meaning it's got a lot of the bright blues, or a warm blue, which has a lot of the yellows. We have that chat. It can be transparent, meaning if you put it on your ink over a page or on other colors, you can see right through it to the ink or the other colors. Opaque, meaning, you know, like some of the burnt siennas, some of the phthalos are actually don't show through other things under it. They're very, they cover over things really, really a lot. Non-staining versus staining, I'm actually going to cover that because I like non-staining, and that's literally what it means. Non-staining pigments, you put it on your paper and you can lift it right off, either with a tissue or when it's wet, or even a finger. And for beginners, it makes it really easy, and it allows for some really interesting, good techniques later on. Once it dries, of course, it stays on the paper, but you can re-wet it and lift it back off. So it doesn't tend to get into the grains of the paper and stay as much as staining paints, such as everybody, if anyone's had run-ins with phthalo blue, it's gorgeous, amazing. But once that hits your paper, boom, it's there. It's not coming off. So you have to really commit to it. Makes gorgeous, gorgeous colors though. And then finally, granulating colors versus, well, non-granulating. I just called it smooth because non-granulating just didn't seem like the right way to put it. But granulating is like ultramarine blue and some of the other, well, I think some of the burnt siennas do it. They make lovely textures on the paper. It's how they flow on the paper. So these are just things to keep in the back of your mind. If you're struggling with what you're doing, you'll want to start looking into what kind of paint am I using? And good paints like Daniel Smith, Winsor Newton, your paint tubes or the paint pans it comes with, or their website will tell you. It grades them. Is it a transparent? How transparent? Is it staining? Is it granulating? So those are just good things to know. It's paints. I like to think of individual paints as they're like species. They have different attributes, behaviors, and you just have to learn them. So that said, I really like to simplify. Those of you who've taken a workshop from me, you've got a little bit of this, meaning I go with this kind of tried and true old-fashioned way. It's called a triad. I paint with 3 colors, which they call them the primaries, but I distill it all the way down to a cyan blue, which is a very, very cool blue, a magenta, and a yellow. And I put in my materials exactly what paint name and brand I use. I use manganese blue, I use chrome yellow or aureolin yellow, and I use quinacridone rose for my magenta. Those are all Daniel Smith. Those combine to make just about every color you could want to use in your field sketching in your notebooks. I add burnt sienna and a warm blue, which is indanthrone blue, again from Daniel Smith, because that warm blue is going to do a number of things. It's a beautiful dark, dark, dark on its own. It's practically black when you lay it down really thick. You combine it with burnt sienna and it makes gorgeous grays all the way up to blacks, and I'm going to demonstrate these. And then if you're working in foliage and want to get a nice range of greens, adding a little bit of warm blue to your yellow will just change. I'll show you how it changes the way those greens work and look, and it's great for adding depth to your foliage and getting a wide range of blues. And lots of different reasons to have that in there too. It's easier just to demonstrate it, so I'm going to go straight over to my demo area here. And any questions so far? Oh, we had a question about the koi watercolor. I don't have any experience with koi, so if anyone else has, please put that in the chat. Ryan, you might. Go ahead and do that while I share my screen. You're on mute again for some reason.
I saw that.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm going over to my demo.
There's a question about manganese blue and whether all of those colors are still available.
Good question. You still can find manganese blue, and Daniel Smith just brought out a manganese hue, H-U-E, manganese blue hue, I think they call it, and several others as well. On my handouts, I indicate what the actual name of the color is at the chemistry level. The industry is nice and standardized, so PY is in the yellow, so PY40 is actually like chrome yellow and aureolin yellow. Those are like species names and common names, right? So if you go PY40 for your yellow, then, which is a neutral yellow, meaning it's right in between cool and warm. And I'll show you that on the paper here in a minute. But think of it in terms of species names. Remember, like genus and species, that's how we make sure we're talking about the right plant, right? So if you say the genus and species, there's only one thing that could be, but the common name, you know, trumpet flower, oh my gosh, you know, there's like 400 trumpet flowers worldwide. It's the same with colors. Every manufacturer comes up with their own name sometimes. So anyway, that's one way to get around that. So I'm gonna go to color mixing here. And the first, I'm gonna have to do this a little differently than I normally do there. Normally my kit is up here above it, but it doesn't fit in the frame, so.
While you're getting started with that, there's a question. If my sketch is in pencil, do I need to go over it in ink before I start painting?
Good question. No, you don't. In fact, I'm going to go back and paint right over that deer in a few minutes. It depends on the look that you want to get later. Going back over it in pen will give it a stronger pen and watercolor image. The pencil will tend to fade into the watercolor a bit more, and you'll see that. So it's really your own preference. You can get different effects. So just here, I'll show you what these colors look like straight onto the paper. I call it cyan because I'm calling out the old, if you know the printing industry, the old-fashioned CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and then the K stands for black. But CMY is those are the colors that make other colors. So red, a lot of people say, and I'm kind of in agreement with this, but we can get in lots of arguments over it. Red isn't a primary color because you can make red from other colors. You can't really make magenta from other colors. I can make red from magenta, and I'll demonstrate that. So you can see those are very cool colors. And this yellow is I use aureolin. It's a fugitive color, meaning it tends to fade. So if I was using this in a studio for framed artwork. I wouldn't want to use it, but it's fine for journals. I have to get rid of this here, hold on. Okay, so you can see nice bright, these are transparent colors. They're also very lifting. If I, even just using my finger, that can come off, which I use a lot because maybe I'll blork out of the where I want to paint and I can just quickly get it off. So demonstrating mixing blue and yellow, cyan and yellow to get a green. And I just dip right into those colors. Don't worry about it, you can clean them up later. See how that makes a nice, beautiful, bright leaf green right there. Likewise, let's take a look at magenta and yellow. I'm wanting to go for an orange here. And voila, it's a pretty nice orange. So I got it dirty with a little yellow, with a little too much yellow and a tiny bit of blue. So I'm gonna clean my yellow off here. See how I'm just cleaning it with the brush. And let's do a purple real quick. These are what they call secondary colors. So a secondary color is a mix of a primary plus a primary creates a secondary. Actually makes a nice, very nice purple. Those are all very bright, very pure colors. We can, let's take this green and add a warm blue to it. And you can see what happens as it starts to literally warm up. See the comparison there. So you might want to do that if you want a darker shadows in your plants, or eucalyptus trees, which don't have a lot of the bright green, that type of thing. That's just by way of showing. Now let me show you the center. This is a really great tool. I don't see many people using it. You can create a really beautiful brown with your three primaries. I'm gonna clear that out because that was a mix with the warm blue. So if I mix yellow, cyan, and some magenta, you can see that piece, a little bit more of the blue. There we go. You can make some really beautiful, rich browns. That was just 3 colors, and you get a really nice brown there. Now, how do you do those blacks and darks?
Roseann, there's a quick question about, was that the cyan blue that you used in the warmer green mixture?
Yes, I was just using the 3 primaries, cyan, magenta, yellow. So that was my manganese blue, my aureolin yellow, and my quinacridone rose. Now, I have some resources for you guys at the in the handout, but you can do a triad from any kind of the 3 blue, magenta, yellow. So it could be any number of things. When you experiment though, if you have trouble, you need to dig down, like in a website, janeblundell.com. she can go through why you would use certain colors for triads and not others because of, say, cool versus warm. It's just really what you are after, but there's a rabbit hole here that's incredibly huge and deep. It's a warren you'll never get out of. But these are not the only, my three colors, manganese blue, quinacridone rose, and aureolin, are by no means the only ones to use. I like these because they lift easily. They make every color I could possibly want. They're easy to work with, and I don't have to think about them. And that's kind of my thing, is I don't want to be thinking about all this color theory while I'm out. I just want to throw some stuff on the on my palette and get some cool colors on the page right away. And I feel like I can do that without thinking once I get this used to these. With only 3 colors, it's so easy. I don't have to think too hard about it. So how do you do the blacks? This is so fun. The burnt sienna, which is a great dirt color as well. And then the andanthrone blue, that dark blue. And what's great about blacks and grays, and I'm just dabbing, mixing until I'm liking it. When you mix your own, there's so much more depth and beauty in these colors than, say, lamp black or a black that you buy off the shelf, as it were. Look at how beautiful that is. And then as I add a little more water, the grays are beautiful. Lovely grays. And it's just, it has a lot of depth and interest to it, if you will. The same with using a limited palette. That's what it's called, using a limited palette. And I'm blending all my colors from these. The page has a harmony. The paintings have a harmony because there are shared values in this, or shared tones. So just to show you how this works, using something completely different, so you kind of understand what we're doing with it. I'm going to show you the same painting with limited colors, but using earth pigments. These are mostly green leaf and blueberry. I'm switching to the water brush because my squirrel mop brush, I don't like to use it with the mineral colors, which are very abrasive, and they can tend to really chew up and destroy your expensive natural bristle brushes. So I use my $7 Pentel. But watch this. So there's yellow ochre. Let's take a look at, oh, these are not wet enough. So this is yellow ochre, which is an earth pigment. So these colors up here are made from chemical processes, and they're actually pretty toxic. You don't want to go licking your brush or your fingers or anything. And you definitely don't want to dump your wastewater with these colors out anywhere. You take it home with you, you put it in the municipal drain and keep it out of the landscape. But these are just pure pigment colors. They're dirt made into paint. And then here's the red ochre. Isn't that beautiful? So red and yellow, or magenta and yellow, we're doing a triad here. And then this is a Mayan blue. Now watch this. So that is a limited palette using all earth colors. And if I take my yellow ochre and my Mayan blue, I can get some really interesting light tint shades of green or very dark green, and do some really interesting paintings with them. Very subtle, very pretty. Not everything blends though. This is just kind of a nerdly thing on the side. I thought I could use lapis lazuli, the original ultramarine blue. That's what a lot of the masters used. And I bought lapis pigment from Cornellison in London, and I made my own ultramarine. And it is a gorgeous. Can you guys tell, like, I don't use water brushes? I keep trying to dip it into the water bin. Look at this color is beautiful. It's very granulating, meaning it has a lot of particles showing through. But watch what happens when I try to make a green with it. It just turns kind of brown. So it doesn't have the same properties. There's something about it. It's just not going to mix to create other colors. So it's a standalone color. I use it for skies. It's gorgeous for skies and things like that. But it's definitely not a mixing color in this format. So that's just really, really quick basics of triad limited palette painting. We do whole classes in this, so this is really just an introduction. I can show real quick how I would use this on the deer. And I'm going to use my regular palette here, which is really getting dirty. Oh, here's a fun tip. Ooh, okay, give me a second here. A little dirty. Some people keep a virgin yellow in their palette, which is a really good idea. I'm dumping out my water and getting some new. Okay, let's just do a real quick treatment on this guy, and then we'll open it up for questions. Here's a fun trick for doing grass, dried grass, which we get a lot in the Southwest, and you guys in Southern California, where you get the rolling hills of grass and stuff. I take my yellow and I drop in just a tiny bit of the burnt sienna, and that creates a. I'll do it over here for now. A good grass color if you're going to be doing a lot of dried grass. That's just a quick tip. So with this deer, she's really done colored a lot of grays and browns. So I'm going to drop in. I'm going to start with burnt sienna and the indanthrone, but it's going to have more of the burnt sienna. So I get more of her kind of colors. And I'm just going to do a fairly light wash, not worrying too much about exact details. I want to fill in her colors. See, I got a blork there because it's not staining. I was able to fix that blork. I have a pretty wet brush here, and I'm just kind of pulling the color along. And I'm leaving it puddling where she's in the shade a little bit. And because it's non-staining, I can move it around a little bit too. And I actually should have left her muzzle a little lighter, so I'm going to pull that back. Another reason I really like the non-staining colors is you can play with them while you're working. Whoops, I got a little bit of too much water there, but because, I don't usually like to do that, but we got a bit of a bloom there because I let some water leak onto her. Still a little damp here. I'm going to darken this just a little and give her some more form just by running this along the edges. What I'm trying to do is show some of that shape. I'm getting it damp. And I often just, I work my brush with my fingers, so I just kind of squeegee that off. Don't lick them now. So I don't want a ton of moisture here. And then I want this to bleed in a little bit more. I'm jumping the gun a little bit here because I'm rushing for this. I'm gonna let that dry. But there we've got a good basis for her coloring. And then I might use a lot of burnt sienna here. And I'm not mixing it all the way up. I'm not thoroughly mixing this. I have burnt sienna, a tiny bit of andanthrone, a tiny bit of yellow. And what I'm gonna do is create a base here. And I wanted to go for that mottled look. I don't want it to be all solid. And then at this point, I think what I would do next, after make sure her edges are not dry or are dried or not wet, and then I might go ahead and draw in the frame like Ryan suggested, and maybe I leave her ear or her head, ears kind of coming out of the frame, and then I would paint that frame in. I'm gonna do this like super dirty quick here. See what happens. This is since she was kind of in shadow and there was this kind of dried, grassy thing going on behind her. I'm gonna do that real quick. We're running out of time. And like I said, since this is non-staining, we can move it around while it's still wet. Don't want to move it too much because there's something so much more lovely about colors that you just drop in. And it's not as elegant as we would normally do, but that gives you the background. And then I would go in at this point, maybe as it's drawing over here, maybe we drop in some green foliage. Like that. This is too wet over here. If I do it now, it's really gonna bloom, but I'll do it anyway. Too wet means the color's just gonna spread out and not be. I just dropped some andanthrone directly into that, which is gonna dry as dark shadows. So I'm gonna just leave that now. But you can see how quickly, with only 3 colors, plus the 2 andanthrone and burnt sienna, I was able to throw together a really fun little sketch and drawing. The pencil shows through, yeah, but that's kind of part of the form of the animal, and I like that style, so that works well for me. So Ryan, are there any questions?
Yeah, we had a few questions about materials. So one, probably the first one would be, what paper are you using in your journal?
Yeah, okay. So I use B paper, BEE, 90-pound watercolor, 100% cotton. Archival quality paper is super important. It's probably the only thing that's important if you're going to have a journal that lasts. Ballpoint pen's great, pencil's great, all of those things will last. But if your paper has acid, if it has lignin in it, lignin creates acid hydrolysis, which is that breakdown, the yellowing, it gets brittle. I've got journals from 1996 from a trip up to the Arctic that I can't read anymore because the paper got really dark and brittle and the pencil is no longer legible. So that's a bummer. So good paper, but this isn't expensive paper. B paper is, they'll have it again. It's not available right now. They shut their warehouses down. But
is the B paper, would that be considered a cold press paper, a hot press paper? Do you...
Yes, that's a cold press. I don't like a ton of texture, but there are other papers that have a lot of texture. So Pentalic makes really good paper and good journals. I use loose leaf paper that I bind into my own journal. But B paper also makes journals. B and Pentalic are now owned by the same company. What are other good ones, Ryan?
For journals or loose leaf paper?
Any kind of paper.
For journals, I actually really like the Pentalic journals. It's a little heavier paper, but for general sketching, though, I've already put it in there of just the Strathmore visual journals, mixed media. It's easier to go in between. The really heavy watercolor paper tends to be hard for just quick sketches and pencil and things like that.
Someone said Stillman and Byrne, fabulous journals. Someone asked about how to make a leather journal. We're working on that. So contact me, Michelle, off my email. You can help me figure out how to best share that. They're actually not hard to make. So I can, and I have a template on my website for how I made mine, which is 25 years old now, and it's been on 5 continents and like 200,000 miles of journeys.
There was also a question about the names of the earth pigments and how to get a hold of those.
Yes, the earth pigments that I'm using here, I turned that off. Green leaf and blueberry, just Google it. They have a website. I'll warn you, they're addictive, gorgeous, beautifully made, and very expensive. They're made by hand by a couple in Colorado. I have bought a lot of handmade paints off Etsy and they're terrible. A lot of fillers, poorly mixed. Green leaf and blueberry makes the best. So I just have red ochre, yellow ochre, and then they're Mayan blue. They have a wide range of earth pigments, and they sell little kits when they're in stock. So Billy's on here. He loves them too. But they flow beautifully. They're mixed beautifully. They're worth every penny. I mean, I've had these for years. They don't. I mean, they last a good long time. What other questions?
That was it. Questions that I saw.
So that was just a really, really quick intro to the color thing. But what I really wanted to emphasize was that simple can work really well by being really quick. You saw how quickly I was able to develop that kind of depth and colors on a sketch. It's also less expensive, I feel. You don't have to buy 75 colors or even 20 colors. So in the end, it's less expensive. That said, I have tons of colors because I love to buy colors, but I only ever use these really. Well, let me throw these. I'm going to put these resources for you into the chat. So hang on. You can print these out.
While you're doing that, do you want me to shift over to, while you're updating chat stuff, do you want me to start talking about my paints and color?
Yes, I totally went over. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, Ryan, hit your color thing.
Sure. So I am going to again share. So my approach for color, you know, again, talking about the fact that this is simply how we do things. There is no right way to do things. we're gonna keep emphasizing that. I'm pretty new to watercolor. The first time I picked up a watercolor brush was about 2 years ago, and I've just been sort of playing as a hobby. So I have a slightly different approach. It's not wrong from Roseann's. It's just a different one. I love nerding out about colors, so my palette has a lot of colors. It's not a minimalist one. I also tend to be have a lot less time for mixing colors, so I tend to just grab and go. I think one of the main things that I would want to mention here is, particularly when learning it, is not to be afraid of it. Yeah, you can totally get down the rabbit hole, like she said, of colors. The main thing is just play with it, get some colors in there, and see how it goes. Yeah, I think in a lot of nature journaling, we talk about the fact that it's quantity over quality, which is hard to keep in mind, but I think in a lot of cases it's a realistic, it's certainly a realistic way to learn. There was also a question about water brushes. I almost exclusively use water brushes, just because that's sort of how I learned, and also I like the ease of it. I can just pull the water brush out, paint something quickly, put it back away, and move on. I don't have to have a cup for wastewater and things like that. But it's totally up to you. There's definitely less control of the moisture with a water brush, so it's always a compromise. Just so people can sort of see, I'm sure there may be questions about this, so I'll show you this quickly. When I'm in the field, I just have one mixing palette and one paint palette with a bunch of colors. I often don't even remember what the names are. I just kind of go by eye. I also keep most of my colors, when I pull them, they're actually coming from my mixing palette, not from actually my paint palette. And if I'm in the field, I'll take one of these and one of these and a clipboard, and then my journal on the clipboard, all sort of contained, hold it, contain, and walk. Now that I'm not doing any walking because I'm just sitting inside, I have more paints and more palette on my clipboard here to play with. So I'm just going to go through this quickly, and I'm looking back at the picture. So if you have that image, you can scroll back into the chat, and I'll talk through what I'm doing. I don't know if you can actually. Let's see if I can get my paints in the image here as well, so you can see a little of this. I'm kind of just winging it. I want really fast and loose. I see this grass down here. I'm going to put in some bright points of this grass. I have a paper towel that's off screen here that I'm just dabbing in between each one. And then I see some darker. I'm going to just pull some of this in there. And one of the things, I'm not thinking too hard about keeping all the same tone. It's all the same sort of warms, cools, but I'm effectively getting that because I'm keeping a messy palette. And since I'm constantly mixing them together and pulling from the same set, they tend to end up with some matching color in there. I'm now just going to pull some. Oop, that didn't end up what I wanted. Here. And these are all just really quick and dirty. I'm not really thinking this through all that much because I just want to get a sense in there. I end up doing a fair amount of mixing on the page, so throwing on some color, and then while it's still wet, throwing in some other color. I'm going to try and work a little bit from these really robust colors up front back into the back of really sort of light and unsaturated colors towards the back. Let's see. I'm gonna throw a little bit of green in there, but not much. This is sort of hint. Yep.
Ryan, we had a question about the brand of water brush. That's a Pentel, and we all pretty much feel like that's kind of the best one, and it's not very expensive. They're about $8, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I played around with a lot of the other water brushes, and more than anything, I found that the bristles stay in this better than a lot of the other brands. All right, now I want to get these are pretty dark. And you can see I'm really not going in for the details. I'm just splashing in some color here. If you want to go into detail, go for it. This is what I like doing, and so it works for me. And I could add a little bit more if I wanted in here, but this is actually, other than the sky, this might be done for me. I'm just going to do the sky here. And the sky, there are an infinite number of ways that you could address the sky. I'm going to do, what I've been having fun with is, I'm going to take just a clean watercolor brush and squeeze out some water into the sky here. Just get it all nice and wet in there. I'm going to grab some blue and just mix it into almost a random palette, mixing palette to sort of pick up some other colors so it's not entirely that. And I'm just going to dabble in some blue. Get a little bit more. One thing you'll notice is this style for the whole drawing gives a sort of unsaturated look for the whole thing. There's not a lot of really bright colors. That's a personal preference. Doesn't have to be that way. This is just how I end up doing it. I'm now going to take just a little bit of, this is Payne's Gray, mixing it with a little bit of that, and just coming in here, a little bit of shadows on some clouds. Well, it's all still damp here, so you can see this is each cloud is a little bit fuzzy still. And that's it for the cloud. Again, overdoing it is a real danger. Last thing I'm going to do is come in, this is shadow violet now, is just add a little bit of shadow in some spots to sort of make this pop a little bit more. Maybe just a little bit along the water's edge here. Some of these little spots. And that's more or less it. This is now, sorry, this might, coming a little clearer. One of the other things that you'll notice that I tend to do without thinking, but ends up pretty handy. I've actually, like, this little gap where there isn't color there, is sort of intentional. I actually started doing it by accident, but I now actually like it because it gives more of a separation, and they're not really bleeding together as much, and so it really keeps this grass in the foreground. But other than that, that's, for me, I'm happy with that. It's quick, it's easy, it takes just a couple minutes, and I can move on.
Very nice. I love your spare colors, that tinted look, if you will. Really nice. Any questions for Ryan here? I did share some materials. I will share the PDF as well from the presentation. Any other questions here? I've got another couple of polls. If before we wrap up and you leave, I would love to know a couple things. This last one, what inspired you? Especially would love to hear that one. And then we've got Anne says, thank you. In spite of the challenges of the pandemic, having access to workshops like this has been a gift. I agree, and it's great. Yeah, Ryan couldn't stop. He's coloring his pen nails. See, that's me. I won't leave them be. I want to color them all in. So you'll notice that, so Ryan's just learned his colors. He has a lot of colors, and he's learned them like it's like a language. So, or piano keys on a keyboard. He uses them a lot, and so he knows exactly where to pull that Payne's gray, where I make my own Payne's gray from the blue and the burnt sienna. I make my own shadow violet. So whatever works is great. The main thing is just knowing where those colors are in your palette so you can quickly find them and not angst about it. And there's only one thing that really helps with that, and that is, got to do it frequently. So that's your main challenge probably. Nice, thank you. Let's see. Ryan, did you buy your colors in a set, and what brand? Yes, tell us about that lovely little palette. I recognize that palette.
I'm actually going to switch over so I can show you that, and I'll share again. So my, no, it didn't come as a set. I basically bought individual colors and then added them to the set. Let me show you the palette itself. So this is the palette. It's from Art Toolkit.
That's Expedition Art.
Yeah. And they're great. I think they're actually repurposed business card holders. At least that's the size it looks like. And each one of these little little metal tins sticks to a magnet at the bottom of the palette, so they hold in there. I do have, as you might see, I have the actual name of the color written on the back, but I tend to not actually think of it in terms of those names. They're really easy. They're really small. Put it in a shirt pocket. Well, I wouldn't do that because if it's wet, it's just gonna bleed into your pocket. But I still do it anyway. And I usually just keep a clip on it, not because I need to keep it closed, but this is how I just need to pull this out and then clip my board or my book or whatever it is and roll with it. Most of my paints are Daniel Smith paints. I think that I kind of went at the probably expensive route in buying a lot of paints over the last couple of years. And the reality is I had fun playing with them and learning about them. And now I use very, very few of them. So
that was the same for me. And it was just a process for me. I'm a bit of a minimalist to begin with, but it's whatever works for you that is the right thing. And
I think that it's similarly, I think the same answer would go for things like pins or any sort of materials. I mean, the reality is you can do some amazing art with, just picking up some dirt, getting your fingers wet and smearing on a page. You don't need a lot of tools. That said, they can be fun. I'm using right now just a ballpoint pen. I actually started using just a ballpoint pen mostly because I'm teaching a class for undergraduate students, and I don't want to be showing them that you need to have really expensive pens or anything like that. That said, I have some expensive pens that are really fun, but they're not necessary. You know, so it's a balance of like, what do you try to do?
Nice. Well, I think people are starting to sign off, so I think we should wrap it up. I'm about to put the PDF on as the final bit here, and there's some more resources on that. We had one more question maybe come in. Chris said, yeah, Daniel Smith paint, and the palette was art toolkit, expeditionary art.
Yeah.
Great, good. Thank you all for coming. Like we really had, that was fun. And we'd love feedback. In addition, if you don't mind dropping an email, or I can do an anonymous one. I can send that out. We'd love feedback or ideas for other stuff, you know, that you would love to do, specific skills. That's, I think, what we're interested in is kind of this, watching people do something is always easier than having them just talk about it. Sweet, so I think we're, let's see. I'm just checking the chat one more time. Great, thank you everyone. I think we're gonna end the meeting then. It feels like, okay, well, bye. Thank you, huge thanks to Ryan for jumping in like at the last minute, but we actually discovered that we're both doing the same thing. So I think it's fun to converge and do that, and probably cook up some fun things in person.
Before you sign off, I'm just gonna go ahead and unmute all, so if people want
Here,
to
climb up. You climb the tree, bud?
Oh.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.